What's up, folks? Will here from tyGraph. This week I've been getting a lot of questions from organizations looking to measure the effects of having an increase in users working from home. Now, today I'm going to focus particularly around enterprise social because, as we know, if you're working from home, a lot of users don't get those opportunities for serendipitous conversations, either bumping into people into the hallway or just being able to walk over to someone's office on a different floor. And so a lot of those questions were centered around our tyGraph for Yammer and tyGraph for Teams tool. So I'll be focusing on those today, but just know that the principles that I'll be going through are applicable in tyGraph for SharePoint and OneDrive as well. Now, the reason I leave tyGraph Pulse out of that equation is because it's still at a very high level. And part of the full value of the tyGraph breakout tools, as we call them, is that we can get down to analyzing this data right down to a person, down to a day, down to a team, channel, Yammer group, in a great amount of detail that you wouldn't otherwise be able to do with any other tools. And so I'm going to go through that today, and I'm going to answer three main questions that I feel like came up a lot this week. And the first one is, how do we know if there's a change in adoption across these different tools? If there is a change in adoption, how do we know where that adoption is going on? Is there activity concentrated in certain areas of the company or in certain groups, teams, channels, and so on? And then finally, we're going to look at who are those users who are engaged, and also, which was very important to a lot of people, is who are the users who aren't engaging. So we're going to focus on how we can find out all that. Let's get started. So we're going to start in the recent activity page for whatever report you're using, whether it's Teams, SharePoint, OneDrive, or Yammer. All of them will have a recent activity page. And the reason that this is such a great place to start is because in the top left-hand component, we'll always include a trend and percentage to help you understand how engagement is occurring within that particular breakout tool. And these percentages are giving us the engagement. And engagement, even though we define it differently for every single tool because there are different signals we're collecting, the way that we measure engagement and classify whether something or someone is active or not is the same across all of our tools. So I'll just take a quick second to explain what that means. So an engaged member is any member who has taken any one of these May score metric items that we've selected in the report period. So this is saying that 414 members have either mentioned someone, messaged someone, or reacted to something from March the 2nd to March the 31st. We can use the same principle when it comes to how many teams have been engaged. It's the exact same thing. 261 teams have had one of these acts of engagement for the report period. And the reason that this is so valuable is we can say, well, more, or in this case, with our demo data set, don't get too stressed about it, there's been a decrease in users who have been engaged from March the 2nd to the 31st, and we're comparing that against the 30 days prior to the period that we're in. So that would be from March the 1st to 30 days prior to that, we had 458 users who were engaged. And so that's going to result in a 9% decrease in the amount of users who are engaged. And so right away, you don't need to do anything at all. You can simply go to these report pages and understand if you are engaging more or less users just by looking at the recent activity report for any of our breakout tools. So Yammer, Teams, SharePoint, or OneDrive. Now we can take this a step further and understand where are they actually engaging? And we can look over at the team May score for this. What this is a ranking of all the different teams in the organization based on the measure of active engagement. And the measure of active engagement is a summation of all the different activities that are going on within these different teams. And so I can very quickly understand where engagement is happening within the company by scanning the top of this list. I can even narrow it down. Say if we had a whole bunch of users who shifted to working from home at the start of the week. So I'm looking at either Monday or Tuesday. If I see a large spike on one of these days, I can simply select that day and I can see that Tiki Industries, boom, a whole bunch of people had to have been engaging in there because we can see that the May score is so high in that particular team. Now from here, for those of you who are interested in what channels are going on or are happening channels, you could say, within this team, how do we know what those are? And we can go right down to that level. So if I select the drill down mode and turn it on. Now when I select Tiki Industries, it's going to take me to the second level, and we'll see that there's really just one channel in here called resources. And apparently it's a pretty happening channel. A lot's going on in there, and that's where everyone was running to. So just from a couple clicks, we can very quickly create a snapshot of what's going on within teams in this case, once we've made a change in the organization. So I'm going to unselect that. So our next question is, how do we understand who those users are who are driving this engagement after we've made that change? And so we were looking at Tiki Industries a second ago. Let's figure out who these users are who are generating 125 actions of engagement on this particular day, and see if that gives us a clue as to where the community is right now. And so we can take a look at the teams and channels page, for example, and I can go on the left-hand side, search for our team. So if I find Tiki Industries and select them now, we can see all the users who had engagement, which is anyone who has a Maze score, listed here as being an engaged user. And we can see it's actually concentrated. We have one user who is just posting like crazy. And so that's important to know. It's not that we have some sort of broad level of engagement. We saw that the number of users who are engaging is up, but clearly there's one person who's driving a great deal of this activity. And so that helps us understand that, well, hang on, there's a lot of other people that are in this team that aren't engaging. Let's go and find a way to either engagement or talk to the user who is engaging a ton and get their insight into how to involve different people from their organization. So next I want to talk about another scenario, which is for companies who have enabled an Active Directory connection in with their tyGraph data. And the reason this is so beneficial is because you can make use of regular attributes, such as the country that a user is from. So for example, if there are changes to a lot of users working from home in a certain area, we can actually select the country of origin from Active Directory on those users and measure engagement based on their country or location, so on. But also there are, I know of customers of ours who have extension attributes where they're literally flagging users who are working from home versus working in an office, or contractors, whatever. And so I want to remind those users that you can also make use of that integration here. So for example, I've brought out this HR attribute 1. It's the first extension attribute for our demo company. And here we can see we have users who work from home just tacitly listed in Active Directory. And so just as a reminder for those of you who do have that enabled, that you can find that attribute. If it's not here already, I'll show you. Let's edit the report. And inside the user table, you'll see that there are a number of HR attributes that are provided to your company. And so if you're probably in the admin or analyst circle of users in your company, you will see these. And you can actually drag and drop these right out into the filter pane to get the same result as I have here. And this can be very handy. So if I select work from home, now we can actually see the engagement for teams and do the exact same analysis that I showed a minute ago, but now only focused in on users who are working from home. Finally, I want to go through some examples of how we can go deeper with this tyGraph data and start tacitly listing users in a way that we can automate. Say if you're getting asked to generate reports routinely, or if you want to take a look at lists of who these exact users are as you engage them, we can do that very easily with this model. And a big part of the benefit of deploying in the Power BI service, like I've been showing this entire time, is that, as you saw a second ago, we can switch into editing mode, and it affords us to be able to rearrange these visuals. You're no longer stuck with the default layout that we've put together at tyGraph, and you can make use of the rich data model that you'll find in the field section on the right-hand side. So if I click this and open up the metrics table, you can see, boom, there's a big list of attributes that we've provided to you and that we don't always necessarily make use of in the Canvas area with the default layout. And so let's go through and answer some common questions that I got this week. I'll show how to do this with tyGraph for Teams first. So let's go over what I encourage people to do is we actually provide a template page. You can see it at the bottom. I can right click and duplicate the page. And now that I've done that, it provides us the layout here, but we can start dragging and dropping attributes that we want. The other thing I'll do is I'll just erase our work from home users for now. I just want to focus on the entire company. So engaged users are a good way to start. We talked about this right at the start of this demo where we wanted to see who are the users that we are engaging. So if I drag and drop that out here, we will see that familiar number, 414 engaged members, which we saw on the recent activity page. And say we want to actually know who these 414 people are. Next, I can go to the user table, and I can actually just drag that right out into the open. So we'll take a look at maybe member name, and then I'll open up the visualizations panel and change it to a table. And so right away, we can see who those 414 users are who are engaged, and just have a list of that. Say you wanted to know other things about them, like what are their email, or have an email action on them. We can go in here and drag and drop email onto here, email action. And so very quickly, you can see here are the 414 users that we have that are engaging. Now the next question a lot of people wanted to know though is who am I newly engaging? Say we made a change recently and we want to know who have we added to the team's environment who wasn't engaging before. And so you can easily see this as well by adding a different measure in called engaged members from the previous period. And so when I add this to the visual, we can now see that there are examples where, let me clear out the email and email action. We can see that there are examples like Aaron here, who was engaged from the 2nd of March to the 31st, but wasn't in the period before that. And so that's a user that we newly had added and started participating in Teams. And so if I want to draw a list of who these people are, rather than surfing through this, I can select the visual. So we have the visual corners on it, go to the engaged members previous period and say, show me all users where that's blank, and hit apply. And now we have the list, and we can see that we actually gained 113 users. And here's the list of specifically who they are. So the last step, I can hit the close on the visualization itself. So we just trim that out and make it look a little more tidy. And there we have it. That's a list of our different members who are newly engaged. I'll even rename it so that I can remember what that really means. The final example a lot of people were asking this week was also, how do we know who has not been engaged? Like out of our recruitable population in the company, who are we missing out on? Who's either being excluded from the conversation or who hasn't bothered to jump in onto the network and participate? And we can get that list as well. So let's go down into the metrics table, and there's a measure called the unengaged members. And if I add that out here, we'll see the difference basically between our 414 and everyone else on the tenant. And so we can actually, I'm going to delete this. And if I didn't explain earlier, you can Control-C, Control-V to copy and paste visuals. I do this all the time. I find it's very handy just to copy items and save myself time. And I'm going to add unengaged members instead of newly engaged members. And I'm just going to clear the filter that I had on engaged members from before. So our last thing we want to do is show us the list of who's unengaged. So then naturally I'll just go to the filter for the visual and say, show me anyone where it is 1. Hit apply. There we go. Now we have a list of everyone who is left that has not engaged in Teams. And so the way that I would make this one particularly useful, I think this would be a great combo with that Active Directory attribute that I showed before. So say you're trying to target a particular area of the business, or like we said, users who we know are working from home. I would take this a step further and then say, let's select HR attribute 1 and say, out of the people who work from home, how many users do we have that are unengaged? And we can see there's a big population here, 826 people who we know work from home haven't actually engaged in Teams in the last 30 days. So 43 have. So we had 43 of our users were newly engaged, and here's the list of who they are. And here's the total of those who did engage. So you can see we get all kinds of different perspectives of engagement in Teams very quickly and generate these sort of lists just by pulling out measures that we have at our disposal in the metrics table. So if you're someone who has the editing capability in Power BI, I'd highly encourage you to take advantage of at least exploring the metrics and pivoting them on different users. And then finally, if you do have Active Directory data integrated as part of your tyGraph, like approved as part of your tyGraph license, then also make great use of that. I find it's very, very useful to be able to see what's going on at that specific context for those users. So as you can see, you could be thrown curveballs like huge changes in the way that the organization works and have things like a massive increase in users working from home. But with tyGraph, you don't have to be left driving blind. And we can go through things like validating whether or not this is having an impact on various Office 365 tools, where increases or decreases in engagement are occurring, and who are those users who are driving that engagement, and listing them out so that we can understand how that affects the organization. If you have questions about what you saw today, as always, you can reach out to me in your tyGraph customer network, private group, or through the support email, which I'll include with this video and the coinciding article. Thanks so much.